We all know Nevada is filled with ghost towns, remnants of the silver boom that brought tens of thousands of prospectors to the desert in the 1800s before the mines ran dry and the towns were abandoned. Most of these ghost towns are accessible to visitors, crumbling buildings and rusted equipment slowly being reclaimed by the desert, nostalgic reminders of the Old West. But scattered across Nevada's vast emptiness are ghost towns you're not allowed to enter. Places where access is forbidden not because of safety concerns or preservation efforts, but because of what lies beneath the sand and within the sealed buildings. These are towns surrounded by chain-link fencing, patrolled by security, and marked with signs threatening federal prosecution for trespassing. And if you ask why, the answers you get are vague, contradictory, or classified. Today, we're uncovering 5 Nevada ghost towns where entry is prohibited, and the disturbing reasons the government doesn't want anyone getting close. Let's start with the most famous and most mysterious, a town that officially doesn't exist. Groom Lake, or, as it's more commonly known, Area 51, is technically not a ghost town because it's still very much occupied, but the civilian settlement that once existed on its borders is gone, erased, and forbidden. Before the government expanded the Nevada Test and Training Range in the 1950s and 60s, there were small mining camps and ranching communities near what would become Area 51. Places with names like Crystal Springs, Tempe, and Rachel, or rather, the Old Rachel, before it was moved several miles away. When the Air Force acquired the land and established the highly classified testing facility at Groom Lake, all existing structures within a designated area were either demolished or seized. Families were given compensation sometimes and told to leave, but not all the structures were destroyed. Aerial photographs from the 1970s, declassified decades later, show intact buildings within the restricted zone, houses, barns, even a small schoolhouse, all abandoned but not demolished. Why keep them standing? One theory is that they were used for testing mock civilian structures subjected to atmospheric experiments or radiation exposure studies to determine how fallout would affect populated areas. Documents declassified in the 1990s confirmed that the Atomic Energy Commission conducted such experiments at the Nevada test site, using structures built specifically for that purpose. But the existence of real civilian buildings, actual homes where people once lived, suggests something more sinister. Were they used for similar tests? And if so, are they still contaminated? Visitors who've approached the Area 51 boundary from public land report seeing the ruins of old structures in the distance, beyond the fences. Some have used telephoto lenses to photograph them, images that show weathered wooden buildings with doors hanging open and windows shattered. But what's strange is that some of these buildings appear to be maintained, roofs intact, paint that doesn't look decades old. Why maintain structures in a ghost town, inside a classified military facility, unless they're still being used for something? Security around Area 51 is notorious. Trespassing is met with immediate response from guards known colloquially as camo dudes, private security contractors who patrol the perimeter in unmarked vehicles. They are authorized to detain trespassers and hand them over to the Lincoln County Sheriff, who charges them with federal crimes. But people who've been caught and released, usually with hefty fines and stern warnings, report that guards seem especially interested in where they were trying to go. Were they heading toward the airstrip, toward the main facility, or toward the old civilian structures? Those caught near the ruins are treated more aggressively, as if proximity to those buildings is somehow more serious than other violations. In 2004, a group of explorers using GPS coordinates from old maps managed to reach the edge of one of the abandoned settlements before being apprehended. They reported seeing not just old buildings, but new construction, prefabricated structures, and antennas positioned near the ruins. One member of the group managed to take several photographs before his camera was confiscated. He later described the scene in an online forum. It wasn't abandoned at all. There were vehicles parked near the buildings, generators running, people in hazmat suits working inside one of the old houses. They weren't preserving history, they were using it. What exactly is happening in the old ghost towns within Area 51's boundaries? Are they contaminated with radiation or chemical agents from Cold War experiments? Are they being used for current classified projects that require realistic civilian environments? Or are they simply forgotten relics that the government keeps off limits out of an abundance of caution? The answers remain classified, and the ghost towns remain forbidden. But at least with Area 51 we expect secrecy. Our next ghost town is different because it was publicly accessible for decades before suddenly, and without clear explanation, becoming forbidden. Berlin Ichthyosaur State Park in central Nevada contains one of the best preserved ghost towns in the state, the former mining camp of Berlin. The town thrived briefly in the early 1900s before the ore ran out and residents moved on. For decades, visitors could walk freely through Berlin's remaining structures: a mill, a assay office, boarding houses and homes, all maintained by the state as a historic site. But in 2017, large sections of the town were suddenly fenced off, and access was restricted. The state claimed it was due to structural instability. The old buildings were collapsing and posed a danger to visitors. But locals who'd been visiting Berlin for years said the buildings hadn't changed. They were no more dangerous in 2017 than they had been in 2007 or 1997. And more puzzling, the fences didn't just block buildings. They blocked access to entire sections of the surrounding desert. Areas with no structures at all. Just open ground. Why fence off empty desert? Then came the reports. Hikers who entered the restricted areas before the fences were completed described finding fresh excavations, not old mining shafts but new digs, rectangular pits with clean edges and disturbed soil. Some claimed they saw equipment, ground-penetrating radar gear, and surveying tools left near the pits as if a team had been working there recently and planned to return. When state park officials were questioned, they denied any excavation activity and reiterated that access was restricted for safety. But in 2018, a group of researchers from the University of Nevada requested permits to study geological formations near Berlin. Their request was denied without explanation. When they pressed for a reason, they were told the area was under evaluation for potential hazards, and that no research permits would be issued for the foreseeable future. What hazards? The state wouldn't specify. Then, in late 2018, a strange detail emerged. A contract was filed with Nye County for environmental monitoring services in the Berlin area, paid for by the Nevada Division of Minerals. The contract specified air and soil sampling to detect specific isotopes and chemical compounds, a list that included uranium-235, cesium-137, and several industrial solvents used in mining. This suggested contamination, possibly radioactive. But Berlin was never a uranium mine, and it ceased operations in the early 1900s, long before nuclear materials were used in mining operations. So why test for radioactive contamination? One theory is that Berlin's abandoned mine shafts were secretly used for disposal during the Cold War. The Nevada test site, where hundreds of nuclear weapons were detonated, is less than 100 miles away. It's known that radioactive waste from the test site was sometimes transported to remote locations for storage or disposal. And Berlin's isolated location and existing underground infrastructure would have made it an ideal candidate. If this theory is correct, the state may have recently discovered contamination levels that made the area unsafe for public access, hence the sudden restrictions and ongoing monitoring. But this doesn't explain the new excavations or why ground-penetrating radar was being used. If the goal was simply to monitor contamination, you wouldn't need to dig new pits or survey empty desert, unless they were looking for something, or trying to recover something that was buried there decades ago. Berlin remains partially accessible. The main ghost town structures can still be visited under supervision, but the restricted zones remain fenced and off-limits. Guards don't patrol the area visibly, but locals report seeing unmarked vehicles near the fences at night, and hikers who strayed too close have been intercepted and warned to leave. The town that was once a symbol of Nevada's mining history has become a symbol of something else: secrecy, forgotten Cold War projects, and questions the state refuses to answer. But if Berlin's closure is mysterious, our third ghost town is downright ominous. Tybo, located in Hot Creek Valley in central Nevada, was a silver mining town that boomed in the 1870s and died by 1970s and died by 1900. Like many Nevada ghost towns, Tybo was abandoned when the silver ran out, and for over a century it sat quietly in the desert, visited occasionally by history enthusiasts and photographers. The town's ruins include foundations, scattered timber, and the remains of a charcoal kiln used to process ore. It was never particularly famous, just another forgotten dot on the map, until 2011, when it was suddenly declared off-limits. The Bureau of Land Management issued a closure order, citing safety hazards related to unstable mine shafts. Trespassing was now subject to fines up to $10,000 and possible jail time. This was unusual because thousands of abandoned mines exist across Nevada, and while they're dangerous, most are simply marked with warning signs, rather than completely restricted. But Tybo was different. The closure included not just the immediate town site, but a 2-mile radius around it, encompassing open desert with no visible structures or shafts. Why such a large exclusion zone? And why enforce it so aggressively? Shortly after the closure, reports began surfacing from people who lived in nearby towns like Warm Springs and Tonopah. They described seeing convoys of trucks traveling to and from Tybo, always at night, with no markings on the vehicles. Some reported helicopters landing near the ghost town, staying for a few hours, then leaving. When locals asked BLM officials what was happening, they were told it was routine maintenance, sealing hazardous shafts, and cleaning up old mining debris. But the activity continued for months, far longer than any cleanup should require. In 2012, a group of off-road enthusiasts accidentally entered the Tybo restricted zone while navigating by GPS station. They were intercepted within minutes by armed security contractors, not BLM rangers, private security, who demanded identification, took photographs of their vehicle and faces, and escorted them out of the area under threat of arrest. The group later described the encounter on an off-road forum, noting that the security personnel were professional and heavily equipped. Not the kind of presence you'd expect for a routine mine site closure. They also mentioned seeing lights in the distance near Tybo, bright work lights, as if a construction site was operating at night. When asked, the security contractors refused to comment. What could require such secrecy in a long-abandoned silver mining town? One possibility ties back to the Nevada test site. Tybo is located within 100 miles of the test site, and during the Cold War, it's known that surrounding areas were used for various experiments. Some researchers have suggested that Tybo's mines were used for underground testing or storage, possibly for radioactive materials or experimental weapons components. If contamination was discovered in the 2000s, a cleanup would explain the activity. But it doesn't explain the helicopters, the armed security, or the long duration of the operation. Another theory is that Tybo contains something of value, not silver but rare earth minerals or lithium deposits that have become critical to modern technology. If such resources were discovered, it's possible the government or a private contractor is quietly extracting them under the guise of a closure. But this theory has its own problems, namely that the BLM typically issues mining permits and public notices for such activity, which didn't happen with Tybo. Whatever the truth, Tybo remains forbidden. The closure order is still in effect, and surveillance of the area continues. Hikers who've tested the boundaries report drones overhead and vehicles appearing quickly to intercept. The ghost town that was once freely accessible is now a no-go zone, and the reasons remain classified. But if Tybo's restrictions seem excessive, consider Rhyolite, one of Nevada's most famous and most photographed ghost towns, or at least it was until recently. Rhyolite, located near the California border and just outside Death Valley National Park, was a major boomtown in the early 1900s, complete with a stock exchange, opera house, and even concrete buildings. Rare for mining towns of that era. It died quickly when the mines failed, and for over a century, Rhyolite has been one of Nevada's most visited ghost towns, its picturesque ruins appearing in countless photographs and films. The town is part of the Bullfrog Mining District, and while some areas have always been restricted due to active mining claims, Most of rhyolite was open to the public until 2020. In March 2020, citing concerns about vandalism and safety, the BLM announced that access to rhyolite would be limited. Certain structures, including the famous bottle house and the old train depot, were fenced off. But the restrictions went beyond preservation. Large sections of the surrounding desert, areas with no structures or historical significance, were also closed. And unlike previous closures in other ghost towns, rhyolite's restrictions included aerial restrictions. Drones were prohibited within a 3-mile radius, and private aircraft were advised to avoid the area. Why ban drones and aircraft over a ghost town? The official explanation mentioned concerns about disturbing nesting birds and the fragility of the ruins. But photographers and historians who'd been documenting rhyolite for years pointed out that the restrictions didn't match the stated concerns. The restricted aerial zone extended far beyond where any ruins or bird nests existed, covering empty desert. And the timing was suspicious. The restrictions were announced just weeks after geological surveys were conducted in the area by a private mining company, Ioneer, which holds claims for a lithium mine nearby. Rhyolite sits on land that overlaps with some of the richest lithium deposits in North America, resources critical to battery production and electric vehicles. Some observers believe the restrictions aren't about protecting the ghost town at all, but about controlling access to the surrounding area while mining operations expand. By closing rhyolite and restricting aerial observation, the company and government can operate without public scrutiny. But there's another layer to the story. In late 2020, a group of urban explorers who sneaked into the restricted area at night reported finding recent excavations near rhyolite's outskirts. Not old mining shafts, but new test pits with survey markers. More disturbing, they described finding an entrance to a tunnel system that didn't appear on any historical mining maps. Modern construction, concrete walls, and LED lighting running on battery packs. They explored the tunnel for about 100 feet before hearing voices and retreating. When they tried to report the discovery to authorities, they were told they'd be charged with trespassing if they returned or discussed the location publicly. Rhyolite, once a symbol of Nevada's open history, has become a fortress. Access is monitored, drones are banned, and anyone who gets too curious is warned off or prosecuted. The ghost town, ironically, has become more alive with secrets than it ever was with people. And finally, we come to the most disturbing of Nevada's forbidden ghost towns, a place so dangerous the government won't even confirm its name. In the remote Pahranagat Valley, there exists a cluster of abandoned buildings, foundations, and sealed mine shafts that locals refer to simply as the Dead Zone. No official maps list it, no historical records name it, and no one alive remembers when it was inhabited or why it was abandoned. But everyone in the valley knows where it is, and everyone knows you don't go there. The Dead Zone first came to public attention in the 1980s, when a group of hunters stumbled upon it while tracking game. They found a small settlement, maybe 10 or 12 structures, all in advanced stages of decay. What struck them as odd was the condition of the buildings. They weren't just old, they were burnt. Every structure showed signs of fire damage, but not natural wildfire. The burns were focused, as if each building had been deliberately torched. And stranger still, no vegetation had grown back around the ruins. The ground was bare dirt and ash, even though the surrounding desert was thick with sagebrush and creosote. The hunters took photographs and reported their find to county officials, thinking they'd discovered an unknown historical site. Instead, they were visited by federal agents who confiscated their film and warned them against returning to the area or discussing its location. One of the hunters later described the encounter. They weren't friendly. They didn't explain anything. They just took our stuff and told us that if we went back or talked about it, we'd be arrested for trespassing on federal land. But it wasn't marked as federal land. There were no signs, no fences, nothing. In the years since, the Dead Zone has been fenced, though not comprehensively. Sections of barbed wire and chain link appear in seemingly random configurations, as if someone started to secure the area but never finished. Signs warn of contamination, but they don't specify what kind. Radiation? Chemical? Biological? The signs simply say contaminated area, do not enter. Authorized personnel only, federal property. But there's no agency listed, no contact information, just vague warnings. Locals tell stories about the dead zone, though none can confirm their truth. Some say it was a test site for biological weapons during World War II, a place where captured diseases were studied and accidentally released, killing everyone in the settlement. Others claim it was a town where miners uncovered something in the depths, something that made them sick, drove them mad, or worse. A few whisper that it was a punishment site, a place where the government sent people who knew too much and made sure they never left. What's certain is that the dead zone is monitored. People who've approached the area report seeing cameras mounted on posts, sometimes disguised as rocks or dead trees. Vehicles passing on nearby dirt roads are tracked, and if they stop too close to the restricted area, security arrives within an hour, always in unmarked trucks, always refusing to identify their agency or purpose. In 2015, a researcher interested in Nevada's mining history used satellite imagery to locate the dead zone and study its layout. The images showed the ruined structures, the barren ground, and something else, a large rectangular excavation near the center of the settlement, freshly dug, with dirt piled nearby, and what appeared to be equipment staged at the edge. The excavation hadn't been there in previous satellite images from 2010. Someone was digging in the dead zone recently, and they'd moved earth without leaving any public record or environmental impact statement. When the researcher tried to file a Freedom of Information Act request for records related to the site, the request was denied. The government stated that no such location existed in federal records, and that no permits had been issued for work in that area. But the satellite images prove otherwise. Something is there, something is being excavated, and someone is working very hard to keep it secret. To this day, the dead zone remains nameless, unacknowledged, and forbidden. It exists in the gap between official reality and local knowledge. A ghost town that may have never officially been a town at all. 5 ghost towns, 5 forbidden zones, 5 places where Nevada's desert hides more than history. From the civilian ruins inside Area 51 to the contaminated mines of Berlin, from the night convoys at Taibo to the monitored silence of Rhyolite, and finally, to the unnamed horror of the dead zone, each location tells the same story. There are places the government doesn't want you to see, questions they don't want you to ask, and secrets buried so deep they're willing to prosecute anyone who gets too close. Nevada's ghost towns were built on dreams of silver and gold, but what they've become are monuments to secrecy, testing grounds for projects we'll never know about, and dumping grounds for mistakes the government wants to forget. If you want to see more forbidden places and the secrets they hide, subscribe and let us know in the comments which restricted zone we should investigate next. Because across America, there are places where the past isn't just forgotten, it's guarded, and the ghosts that haunt them aren't spirits. They're truths no one wants discovered.